The grand chambers of the Galactic Council stretched impossibly high, their crystalline walls refracting light in patterns that had dazzled representatives of 1,000 species for over 10 millennia. Dr. Kazera adjusted her ceremonial robes with trembling appendages, her epidural scales shifting from deep blue to a pale green that betrayed her anxiety. The council members loomed above her on their elevated platforms, their various forms unified by the same dismissive expressions. "Distinguished council members," she began, her translator working overtime to keep her nervous clicks and whistles coherent. "I come before you with urgent findings regarding species designation 47,291, locally known as humans." She activated her data projection, and the chamber filled with holographic displays of Earth and its inhabitants. The Grand Arbiter, a massive being of pure energy contained within an ornate metallic shell, leaned forward slightly. "Another report about the chemical rocket species. We have received 17 similar presentations this cycle alone. With respect, Arbiter, this is different." Kizora brought up combat footage from Earth's historical archives. "Unlike any species we've encountered, humans have developed through constant conflict. Their technological progress isn't driven by peaceful exploration, but by warfare, yet they've avoided self-extinction." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Councillor Vex of the Diplomacy Division fluttered his wing membranes in obvious disdain. "They still fight with projectile weapons and combustion engines. They haven't even unified their planet." "That's precisely my point," Kizura pressed on, her scales now showing patches of determined red. "In just 3 centuries, they had progressed from primitive atmospheric flight to establishing colonies on their neighboring planet. Their rate of advancement is unprecedented." She quickly switched to another display, showing human medical procedures. "They've begun modifying their own biology, performing surgical alterations that would be considered barbaric by our standards. But look at their success rates. They're adapting their own species through trial and error, learning from each failure instead of being deterred by it." The scientific division's representative, a crystalline entity named Sith, chimed in with harmonics of amusement. "Young one, every emerging species experiments with their form. It's a phase, nothing more." Kazera felt her chance slipping away. In desperation, she activated her final piece of evidence, a classified simulation of human response patterns to first contact scenarios. "Our standard models can't accurately predict their behavior. They simultaneously prepare for peace and war. They create art about alien invasions while sending out peaceful greeting messages to the stars. They're capable of compartmentalizing contradictory concepts in ways our psychologists can't fully grasp." The Grand Arbiter's containment shell hummed with growing irritation. "Enough. Your concern for a pre-quantum civilization is noted, but misplaced. Humanity will follow the same development path as all species before them. They will either destroy themselves or advance beyond their violent tendencies. But what if they don't?" Kazera's scales had turned almost white with frustration. "What if they maintain their warlike innovation even as they advance? They've already split the atom, developed rudimentary AI, and begun genetic engineering, all while still fighting among themselves. Their conflicts don't slow their progress. They accelerate it." The chamber fell silent for a moment, but it wasn't the thoughtful silence Kazara had hoped for. Instead, the council members began the subtle movements that indicated they were communicating on their private quantum channels, deliberately excluding her from their deliberations. Finally, the Grand Arbiter spoke. "Dr. Kazara, your passion for xenobiology is commendable, but your conclusions are flawed by inexperience. This council has guided thousands of species through their development. Humanity will be no different. You are hereby reassigned to the Outer Rim Statistical Division, where you can gain a broader perspective on species development." As security drones approached to escort her out, Kizera made one final desperate move. She quickly transferred her complete research files to her personal quantum cache, knowing that someday someone would need to understand what she'd discovered about humanity. The last thing she saw as she left the chamber was Counselor Vex already calling for the next speaker, her warnings forgotten before she'd even reached the door. The eternal wisdom emerged from quantum space in a cascade of crystalline light, its sleek hull designed to inspire awe in primitive species. Commander Vex stood on the bridge, his wing membranes already preened to perfection for the historic first contact. His crew, all veterans of dozens of similar missions, went through their standard procedures with practiced ease. That practiced ease lasted exactly 6 seconds. "Commander," the sensor operator's tendrils writhed in confusion. "I'm detecting artificial structures, thousands of them." Vex glided to the sensor station, his perfect diplomatic composure cracking slightly. The space around Earth's moon bristled with satellites, each one tracking his ship with primitive but effective radar systems. Behind them, the lunar surface hosted sprawling bases, their domed structures clearly visible even from orbit. "Impossible," he whispered. "The last survey was just 6 cycles ago. They were still arguing about reaching their moon." "Sir," his second-in-command, Lara, called out. "We're receiving a transmission. Multiple frequencies, multiple languages." She paused, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns of disbelief. "They're welcoming us. They've been expecting first contact." Before Vex could respond, the main view screen filled with a new image that made his wing membranes flutter in shock. A massive orbital installation hung above Mars, its rotating sections creating artificial gravity through centrifugal force. Mining ships swarmed through the asteroid belt, using fusion drives that weren't supposed to exist in pre-contact civilizations. "They're requesting docking procedures," Lara reported. "They've already prepared a compatible airlock design." "Sir, they're asking if we prefer Earth standard or Martian standard gravity in the meeting chamber." Vex felt his carefully prepared first contact speech crumbling in his mind. These humans weren't supposed to have options for gravity. They weren't supposed to have meeting chambers. They certainly weren't supposed to be casually mining their asteroid belt. The diplomatic team assembled in the ship's conference room, frantically reviewing their protocols. Dr. Nexel, their xenotechnologist, pored over the scanning data with increasing agitation. "Look at their development curve," she chittered, bringing up a holographic chart. "They went from primitive chemical rockets to fusion drives in less than 60 years. That's not just unprecedented. It should be impossible." "Perhaps we should delay the meeting," Lara suggested. "Request new instructions from the Council." Vex's pride wouldn't allow it. "No, we proceed as planned. They're still pre-quantum. We still have superior technology. The protocol remains valid." The human delegation arrived precisely on schedule, their shuttle displaying a level of engineering that made Dr. Nexel's appendages twitch nervously. 5 humans entered the conference room, wearing practical space suits that seemed more advanced than their public technological level would suggest. As the formal introductions began, Vex noticed something that disturbed him more than any of the technological surprises. The humans weren't staring in awe at the ship's quantum crystal architecture or the holographic displays. Instead, they were asking questions, specific questions. "Your artificial gravity generators," one of them said, a female designated as Dr. Sarah Chen. "The field harmonics must create significant power drain. Have you considered using localized graviton wells instead?" Vex blinked all 4 of his eyes. They weren't supposed to even understand the concept of graviton manipulation, let alone suggest alternative approaches. Another human, this one introduced as Dr. James Rodriguez, was examining the wall panels with disturbing intensity. "Interesting choice, using crystalline matrices for your quantum systems," he mused. "We've been experimenting with carbon lattices, less stable, but more adaptable." Lara sent Vex a private quantum message. "They're not asking how anything works. They're questioning our design choices. Commander, I think they've already figured out the basic principles on their own." Vex maintained his diplomatic smile, even as he recalled the dismissed report from a young xenobiologist. What had Dr. Kazera said about human adaptation rates? As he watched the humans catalog every detail of his ship with careful, calculating eyes, he began to wonder if the Council's standard technological restriction protocols would be enough. "Welcome to the Galactic community," he announced, following his script despite his growing unease. "We look forward to guiding your species development." Dr. Chen smiled back, but there was something in her expression that made his wing membranes quiver. "We look forward to learning from each other," she replied, emphasizing the last two words in a way that would haunt Vex's dreams for cycles to come. Administrator Fithola's office aboard the mentorship station was a testament to cosmic bureaucracy. The crystalline walls displayed thousands of scrolling regulations, while quantum processors calculated acceptable technology transfer rates down to the microsecond. She studied the latest report from Earth with growing frustration, her bioluminescent patches pulsing with irritation. "Another accident in the propulsion research wing," she muttered, her translator struggling to convey her exasperation. "Third one this month. These humans are either remarkably clumsy or—" She left the thought unfinished. Her assistant, a young Proximan named Zix, projected the incident details into the air between them. The human engineer claims he tripped and accidentally accessed the quantum drive schematics for 3.7 seconds before the security systems activated. And let me guess, he has an eidetic memory. Fithola's skin rippled with sarcasm. "Actually, no. He claims to have forgotten everything he saw." Zix paused. Though he did submit several theoretical papers to their physics journals the following week. Fithola pulled up the human's file. Dr. Marcus Wong, supposedly a specialist in conventional fusion drives. His work schedule showed him pulling double shifts in areas that often experienced convenient malfunctions. Nothing provable, nothing actionable, but— "Show me the pattern analysis," she ordered. The air filled with interconnected data streams, human research projects, technological accidents, and scientific breakthroughs over the past year. Each incident seemed innocent in isolation. Combined, they painted a disturbing picture. "They're mapping our technology," Fithola realized. "Not stealing it outright. They're reverse engineering everything they see." She zoomed in on one particular cluster of data. "Look here." They requested access to our agricultural replicators, claiming they wanted to study food production. Instead, they focused entirely on the matter reorganization subroutines. Zix's appendages twisted nervously. But the Council's restrictions are being followed to the letter while being completely circumvented in spirit. Fithola brought up another display. "Their questions are too precise. They're not asking how to build quantum processors. They're asking why we chose specific quantum states for computational matrices. They already understand the underlying principles." A priority alert flashed across her displays. Another incident. A human maintenance worker had spent an unusually long time repairing a waste reclamation unit. The security scan showed nothing amiss, but Fithola had learned to look deeper. The worker's repair logs showed they had dismantled and reassembled the unit's molecular restructuring core 3 times, claiming calibration issues. "Pull up their private research networks," she ordered. "But Administrator, that would violate privacy protocols." "Just do it." The displays shifted, showing encrypted human communications. Fithola's bioluminescence dimmed as she read. Hidden beneath legitimate research papers were patterns she recognized. Weapons development disguised as energy research, shield technology masked as atmospheric studies, even rudimentary quantum field manipulation presented as theoretical physics. "They're not just learning," she whispered. "They're improving on our designs." A new alert demanded her attention. Dr. Sarah Chen, the same human who had unsettled Commander Vex during first contact, requested permission to observe the station's quantum communication array for a cultural exchange project about alien social media. Fithola's fingers hovered over the denial button, then slowly withdrew. Refusing would only drive their experiments further underground. At least this way, she could monitor their activities. "Approve it," she sighed, "but triple the security protocols." Zix hesitated before speaking. "Administrator, Perhaps we should report this to the Council. Thethella stared at the endless streams of data, remembering her own early days of naive optimism about guiding younger species. And tell them what? That humans are following every regulation, while simultaneously rendering them meaningless. That they're advancing faster by studying our technology than they ever did on their own. She closed the displays with a gesture, but not before noting one final detail. The humans had begun building new research facilities in their asteroid belt, far from Council monitoring stations. The facilities' power signatures suggested they were already testing prototype quantum drives. No, she decided. We watch, we document, and we pray to the Ancient Ones that Dr. Kazara was wrong about humanity's potential for advancement through conflict. Because if she was right, Thethella's bioluminescence pulsed once in a pattern that translated roughly to, "We're already too late." The Doraxian Central Archive, pride of the Outer Rim, burned. Quantum crystal towers, repositories of 10,000 years of knowledge, shattered like frozen tears. The swarm's biomechanical ships darkened the sky, their acid-etched hulls immune to the archive's perfect defenses. First Archivist Peldon huddled in the emergency bunker with his staff, watching their automated defense systems fail one by one. Their AI, programmed with every known combat algorithm, struggled to adapt as the swarm's ships evolved mid-battle, growing new weapons and defenses with each passing minute. "It's impossible," he whispered, his crystalline form clouded with fear. "The defense grid is self-evolving. It cannot be defeated by mere biological entities." The bunker's quantum comm crackled. "This is Captain Sarah Chen, Earth Defense Force. We're picking up your distress signal. Do you require assistance?" Peldon's staff exchanged confused looks. Humans weren't supposed to have ships in this sector. Their quantum communication privileges had been restricted just last cycle due to security concerns. "This is a council matter," Peldon responded stiffly, pride warring with desperation. "Your species lacks the necessary technological." A new explosion rocked the bunker. Above them, 3 more archive towers collapsed. "With respect, Archivist," Chen's voice carried an edge of steel. "We've been tracking swarm movements for the past month. Your defense systems are predictable. The swarms already learned their patterns. You need our help." As if to emphasize her point, the main defense grid crashed, its perfect algorithms finally overwhelmed by the swarm's chaotic evolution. Emergency screens showed swarm drop pods breaking through the atmosphere, each carrying hundreds of drone warriors. "Their neural network is decentralized," Chen continued. "Traditional council defenses target command nodes that don't exist. But we've developed countermeasures based on Earth's historical experience with guerrilla warfare." Peldon wavered. Accepting help from a restricted species would end his career. Refusing might end his civilization. Another explosion decided for him. "We accept your assistance. About time. All ships, execute Plan Thunder." The bunker's sensors lit up with new contacts. Dozens of ships dropped out of quantum space, but not the sleek council vessels Peldon expected. These were ugly, practical things, built from salvaged asteroid metals and modified council tech. Leading them was the EDF Thunderchild, a massive vessel that looked more like a mobile mining station than a warship. "What are you doing?" Peldon demanded as the human ships moved into obviously inferior tactical positions. "Your formation is all wrong. The swarm will." "Watch," Chen interrupted. The swarm ships descended on the human fleet like hungry predators. But as they attacked, something strange happened. The seemingly vulnerable human ships split apart, revealing hidden weapon systems. Mining lasers, meant for cutting asteroids, sliced through swarm bioarmor. Magnetic mass drivers, designed for launching ore, accelerated chunks of metal to relativistic speeds. "Impossible," one of Peldon's staff whispered. "They're using industrial equipment as weapons." "We've had centuries of practice repurposing technology," Chen explained as her fleet engaged. "The swarm adapts to weapons, but how do you adapt to getting hit by a chunk of tungsten moving at 10% light speed?" The battle that followed defied every tactical doctrine in the archive. Human ships fought dirty, using forbidden technologies and improvised weapons. They violated basic physics with jury-rigged devices that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. When the swarm adapted to one weapon, the humans simply switched to another, their arsenal seemingly infinite in its variety. As the last swarm ship fell, its hull perforated by what appeared to be mining charges configured as depth charges, Peldon received a priority message from the Council. His heart sank as he read it. "They're ordering all human ships to withdraw," he announced. "They're citing 17 different regulation violations, and—" He trailed off as Captain Chen's laughter filled the comm. "Let me guess. Unauthorized weapons development, illegal technology modification, restricted sector violations, among others. Yes. Well, you let us know how those regulations work against the next swarm attack. We'll be in the asteroid belt, doing what we do best, turning mining equipment into weapons that would give the Council nightmares." As the human fleet vanished into quantum space, Peldon stared at the battlefield debris. The Council would demand answers. But as he watched his staff already studying the improvised human weapons with poorly concealed fascination, he wondered if perhaps they were asking the wrong questions. The Council's emergency observation chamber hummed with angry voices. On the central display, footage from the human mining colony, Syrah's base, played on repeat. Swarm ships dissolving under impossible weapons, mining vessels performing combat maneuvers that violated standard physics, and improvised weapons that shouldn't exist. "Explain this," Grand Arbiter demanded of Administrator Fthullah, his containment field crackling with barely controlled energy. "How did a restricted species develop military capabilities that match our best warships?" Fthullah's bioluminescence pulsed with resigned amusement. "They didn't match our warships, Arbiter. They exceeded them, and they did it with mining equipment." The footage shifted to show the EDF Hyperion, a converted ice harvester, using its collection beam to tear a swarm carrier apart molecule by molecule. Another clip revealed cargo haulers deploying clouds of self-replicating nanites, originally designed for asteroid decomposition, that consumed swarm bioarmor like microscopic piranha. "It gets worse," Fthullah continued, bringing up new data streams. "We've confirmed that every human mining operation in the asteroid belt is actually a weapons development facility. Those weren't desperate improvisations we saw. They were conducting field tests of pre-existing weapon systems." The chamber erupted in chaos. Councillor Vex's wing membranes fluttered in distress. But the restrictions, the monitoring, were circumvented with frightening creativity. Fthullah displayed a technical readout. "See this. It's officially registered as a mineral scanner. In reality, it's a quantum state disruption cannon. They built it from scanning our waste recycling systems." Dr. Nexel, recently promoted to head of Xenotechnology, studied the designs with horrified fascination. "These power configurations, they're impossible. They're routing energy through dimensional spaces that shouldn't be stable. And yet they work," Fthullah noted. "Humans have this saying, necessity is the mother of invention. We thought we were restricting their development. Instead, we forced them to become more creative." The display shifted to a new scene, a human tactical briefing recorded by hidden Council sensors. Captain Chen stood before a holographic display, addressing her crew. "The swarm adapts to energy weapons. Fine. Hit them with kinetic rounds. They evolve armor. Switch to phase-shifting projectiles. They develop countermeasures. Good. That's why we have 37 different weapon systems on each ship. We don't need to be stronger or faster. We just need to be more unpredictable than they can adapt to." The Grand Arbiter's containment field pulsed with anger. "This is precisely why we restrict military technology. Species must be guided carefully toward enlightenment, not allowed to develop unchecked weapons." "With respect, Arbiter," Fthullah countered, "that philosophy assumes conventional development paths. Humans don't follow paths, they forge new ones. Every restriction we placed on them became a puzzle to solve. She brought up another display, showing the internal layout of a human mining ship. What appeared to be routine industrial equipment could transform into weapon systems in seconds. Ore processing chambers doubled as ammunition factories. Survey sensors contained targeting systems of remarkable precision. They turned their entire industrial infrastructure into a war machine, Dr. Nexel observed. But how did they test these weapons without our knowledge? Thethula's bioluminescence dimmed. They didn't need to. They designed weapons that could be repurposed from existing technology, tested individual components under the guise of industrial accidents, and relied on centuries of military doctrine to predict what would work. The chamber fell silent as new footage appeared. A swarm dreadnought, previously thought invincible, being systematically dismantled by a fleet of converted mining ships. The humans weren't just fighting. They were adapting their tactics in real time, each ship trying different approaches and sharing data on what worked. We have a choice, Thethula concluded. We can continue pretending we control human development, or we can acknowledge reality. They've built an entire shadow fleet under our noses, turned mining equipment into weapons that rival our best military technology, and they did it all while technically following our restrictions. The Grand Arbiter's containment field flickered as he processed this. And what happens when they turn these capabilities against the Council? Thethula's final words sent ripples of fear through the chamber. They already could have. The fact that they haven't might be the most terrifying thing of all. Dr. Kazara sat in her tiny office on Outpost 47, buried in the endless stream of statistical reports that had been her punishment for warning the Council about humanity. Her scales had long since faded to a dull gray, matching the monotony of her exile. Then her quantum terminal chimed with a priority message bearing the Council's seal. She almost deleted it out of spite. Almost. By order of the Grand Arbiter, your presence is required immediately for consultation regarding species 47,291. The message read, "Your previous analysis is now considered critically relevant." Kazara's scales rippled with colors she hadn't shown in years. Within hours, she stood before the same council chamber that had dismissed her warnings. But the atmosphere was different now. Gone was the casual arrogance. The council members watched her with an intensity that made her epidural scales tingle. "Show her," the Grand Arbiter commanded. The chamber filled with holographic displays, humans converting industrial equipment into weapons, mining ships executing impossible combat maneuvers, improvised technology that defied conventional physics. Kizara watched with a mixture of vindication and dread. "You predicted this," Counselor Vex admitted, his wing membranes drooping. Not just their technological adaptation, but their ability to weaponize anything they touch. "No," Kizara corrected, her scales showing streaks of academic passion. "I predicted they would surprise us. Even I didn't imagine this level of innovation." She gestured to a display showing the human ship using a modified waste recycler as a particle beam weapon. "This is beyond mere adaptation. They're not just learning our technology, they're reimagining its fundamental purposes." Dr. Nexel brought up new data streams. 7 council worlds have already requested human military advisors. The Diraxians are implementing human-designed defense systems. The Proximans want to establish joint research facilities. "And what do the humans want in return?" the Grand Arbiter asked. "Nothing," Kizara answered, studying the reports. "They're sharing their innovations freely with any world threatened by the swarm. No treaties, no obligations." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. A young species, barely out of their gravity well, was giving away military technology that could challenge the Council's dominance. "They're not interested in power," Kizara continued. "At least, not the way we understand it. They don't want to rule. They want to solve problems. It's just that their solutions tend to involve turning mining lasers into weapons that can slice a swarm ship in half." She brought up her original research, now annotated with years of new data. "Look at their history. Every major advancement came from solving immediate problems. They didn't develop nuclear power for energy. They built it as a weapon, then adapted it for peace. They didn't reach space for exploration. They did it to compete with each other, then stayed to mine asteroids. And now, Vex asked, now they've turned every restriction we placed on them into an opportunity for innovation. We didn't just fail to contain them. We accidentally created the perfect environment for them to develop technologies we never imagined. The Grand Arbiter's containment field pulsed with concern. Your recommendation? Zera's scales shifted to a deep, determined blue. Stop trying to control them. They've proven they'll find ways around any restriction. Instead, give them problems to solve. Direct that innovation toward beneficial ends. You want us to deliberately point humanity at our problems? Vex asked, horrified. They're already solving them, she countered. The question is whether we want to work with them or continue pretending we can control them. As if to emphasize her point, a new alert flashed across the chamber's displays. A human research team had just published designs for a theoretical quantum drive that was 30% more efficient than the Council's standard model. They'd developed it by studying the waste heat patterns from Council ships. They're not going to stop innovating, Zera concluded. They couldn't if they tried. It's not just their technology we underestimated. It's their fundamental nature. They don't see barriers. They see challenges. And unlike us, they've never learned to stop questioning why things work the way they do. The Council chamber, for the first time in recorded history, fell into a silence of pure uncertainty. The galaxy's oldest civilization had finally encountered a species that made them question everything they thought they knew about progress. And somewhere in the asteroid belt, human engineers continued their work, blissfully unaware that they were rewriting the rules of a game they hadn't even known they were playing. The Council hub, a station that had known 10,000 years of peace, shuddered under the swarm's assault. Emergency force fields flickered as biomechanical weapons ate through quantum crystalline walls. In the central command chamber, the Grand Arbiter watched his perfect world crumble. Status report, he demanded, his containment field crackling with barely controlled energy. Swarm ships have adapted to our defensive grid, Counselor Vex reported, his wing membranes torn and scorched. They're revolving faster than our systems can compensate. We've lost contact with levels 12 through 47. The tactical display showed hundreds of swarm vessels surrounding the station, their acid-etched hulls morphing and growing new weapons with each passing minute. The Council's automated defenses, designed for perfection, couldn't handle the chaotic evolution of their enemy. Then a new voice cut through the chaos. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. I hear you folks could use some backup. The tactical display erupted with new signatures as human ships dropped out of quantum space, but these weren't the improvised mining vessels from previous encounters. These ships bore the marks of both human ingenuity and Council technology, a hybrid that shouldn't have been possible. What are those? Dr. Nexel whispered, studying the readings with professional fascination, even as the station shook around them. Remember all those theoretical papers we published about quantum mechanics? Chen's voice carried a hint of satisfaction. Turns out they weren't so theoretical. All ships execute Battle Plan Prometheus. The human fleet moved with orchestrated chaos. Each ship seemed to follow its own random pattern. Yet somehow they flowed together like a deadly dance. The swarm, evolved to counter predictable Council tactics, found itself facing an enemy that refused to be predictable. Amazing, Zera breathed, her scales shifting through patterns of scientific excitement. They're using deliberately imperfect technology. Their quantum drives are running at varying efficiencies. Their weapons are intentionally unstable. That's madness, Vex protested. The energy waste alone is exactly the point, Chen interrupted. The swarm adapts to patterns, so we gave our crews basic objectives and let them improvise. No two ships are fighting the same way. The battle that followed defied conventional physics. Human ships launched salvos of quantum-destabilized mining charges, their imperfect detonations creating unpredictable reality fluctuations that the swarm couldn't adapt to. When the swarm evolved armor against energy weapons, the humans switched to kinetic strikes. When it developed shields against physical attacks, they used repurposed terraforming equipment to alter local space-time. Impossible, Dr. Nexel muttered, watching a human vessel intentionally overload its quantum drive to create a temporary wormhole. They're violating every safety protocol we established. Protocols are guidelines, not laws. Chen responded as her ship, the Thunderchild, executed a maneuver that should have torn it apart. Sometimes you have to break the rules to write new ones. The tide turned. The swarm, for the first time in recorded history, began to retreat. Its adaptive algorithms couldn't handle an enemy that combined Council technology's raw power with human unpredictability. But victory came at a cost. Human ships burned and broke, their crews pushing experimental technology beyond safe limits. The Thunderchild's hull glowed with quantum radiation as Chen pushed its hybrid drives past their breaking point. "We can't maintain this level of combat," Vex observed, watching damage reports flood in. "The energy expenditure alone isn't sustainable," Chen finished. "It's not meant to be. Council technology is perfect, but perfection is predictable. Sometimes you need to embrace chaos to achieve victory." As the last swarm ships fled or fell, the Council chamber fell silent. The tactical display showed the aftermath. Human vessels limping on barely functioning drives, their improvised weapons burned out, their hybrid technology pushed to the breaking point. But they had won. "I don't understand," the Grand Arbiter finally said. "You knew these tactics would damage your ships, possibly kill your crews. Yet you came." Chen's response echoed through the chamber. "That's humanity's greatest weapon, Arbiter. Not our technology, not our adaptability. It's our willingness to risk everything to protect others, even those who once dismissed us as primitive. Now shall we discuss rebuilding your station? We have some ideas about improving its defenses." The Grand Arbiter looked at Kizara, whose scales now showed patterns of vindication tinged with concern. They had survived the swarm, but in doing so, they had unleashed something perhaps even more transformative: humanity's unrestricted creativity. One cycle after the Battle of Council Hub, the chamber looked vastly different. Gone were the perfect crystalline walls, replaced by a hybrid architecture that combined Council aesthetics with human pragmatism. Quantum fields now pulsed with deliberate irregularities, making them harder to predict and counter. Dr. Kizara stood before the Council again, but this time as the head of the newly formed Adaptive Defense Division. Her scales rippled with confident colors as she addressed the assembled representatives. "The integration of human innovation has exceeded all projections," she reported, bringing up holographic data streams. 27 Council worlds have implemented hybrid defense systems. The Diraxian archives are being rewritten to include sections on improvised engineering. Even the Proximans have started running combat simulations. The Grand Arbiter, his containment field showing subtle patterns of amusement, gestured toward the chamber's observation deck. Below, a remarkable scene unfolded. Alien students from a dozen species gathered around human instructors, learning not just technology, but a new way of thinking. "Watch this," Kizura said, focusing on one particular group. A human instructor had set up an ancient Earth game, chess, but she wasn't teaching the rules. Instead, she was asking her alien students to invent new ways to play, to question why each piece moved as it did. "The Queen's movement isn't restricted by conventional patterns," a young Proximan observed, his crystalline form vibrating with excitement. "Why can't the Knight combine its unusual movement with vertical displacement?" "Exactly," the instructor beamed. "Now you're thinking like a human. Question everything, then question your questions." In another corner, Captain Chen, now Admiral Chen, worked with Council engineers to redesign quantum drive systems. The new designs deliberately incorporated controlled instabilities, making them harder for enemies to predict and counter. "We've had to create entirely new mathematics," Dr. Nexel admitted, his original horror at human methods now replaced by fascination. Their insistence on imperfection has revealed patterns we never considered. Speaking of patterns, Counselor Vex interjected, his wing membranes now bearing proud battle scars. The latest reports from the Outer Rim are concerning. The swarm is evolving new strategies. Good, Kuzera responded, surprising the chamber. That means our defenses need to evolve faster. Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. The swarm's adaptation drives our innovation. The Grand Arbiter's containment field pulsed with thoughtful energy. And what of humanity itself? Have we unleashed something we cannot control? Kizera's scales shifted to deep wise patterns. That was our fundamental mistake, Arbiter, thinking we needed to control them. Humans don't need control, they need challenges. Look, she displayed footage from Earth's asteroid belt. The mining stations that had once hidden weapon development now openly combine their industrial and military research. Each failed experiment led to new discoveries. Every problem became an opportunity for innovation. They're teaching us something we forgot over 10 millennia of peace, Kizera continued. Perfect stability leads to stagnation. Controlled chaos drives evolution. As if to emphasize her point, alarms suddenly blared. A student's experimental quantum field had collapsed, creating a localized time distortion. Before the council could react, human emergency teams were already responding, treating the accident as a learning opportunity rather than a failure. Remember my original warning? Kizera asked the chamber. I said humans were dangerous because they learned through conflict. I was wrong. They're remarkable because they never stop learning. Period. Every failure, every accident, every limitation becomes a puzzle to solve. The Grand Arbiter gazed around his transformed chamber, at the mixture of species working together in ways the Council had never imagined possible. And what happens when they run out of puzzles to solve? Admiral Chen, who had quietly entered the chamber, answered for them all. That's the beauty of it, Arbiter. We never will. Each answer reveals new questions. Each solution creates new challenges. That's not just human nature. It's the nature of the universe itself. We just needed to remind you of that. As the chamber hummed with activity, Kizera's scales showed one final pattern: hope. The Council hadn't just survived the swarm. They had rediscovered their own capacity for growth. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, new challenges waited, ready to be transformed into opportunities by humanity's unique gift. The ability to see possibilities where others saw only problems. The warning had become a promise, and the galaxy would never be the same.